All right. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here with you. It would be wonderful if someone could just let me know that they can hear me. I'm a little not the best with technology and just want to make sure everything is good. And for some reason, I can't see the chat box. So view chat. Okay, there we go. Okay, good. Okay, yay. All right. Great. Well, it's good to be here with you all. And yay, you can see and hear me. That's a beautiful thing. So this is, I think, session 7 of Mahamudra for the People. And today we're going to be continuing with our look at the view. So last week, I introduced a text by Lama Shang from The Mind of Mahamudra. And on page 44, I did half of his description of the view, and we'll do half today. And again, kind of going back a little bit, the reason why I'm doing this is because typically Mahamudra meditation is taught in a way that addresses these three things: the view, the path, and the fruit, or sometimes the goal. And so the view is the nature of mind. Technically, the nature of mind is something that is beyond words. And so in texts like this, Lama Shang or other Mahamudra masters will kind of use words as best as possible to convey the sense of spaciousness and openness, the kind of primordially free and awake aspect of mind that serves as the basis. And then the section on path is on the practice of Mahamudra. So sometimes that includes actual instructions for the meditation. And then at other times it will consist of words of advice for tweaking meditation so that it's effective. And then the goal is, again, a description of what awakening looks like, which is quite simply the kind of full recognition of the view. And again, if that is not clear to people, later when we do some question and answer, feel free to ask about that. But I was thinking we could start with a little bit of practice, and just maybe a short session, maybe 15 minutes. So if you can, bring your body into a meditation posture that is comfortable. So that could be seated, or it could be laying down. It could be standing on your head, if that's comfortable. But the kind of real important pieces are allowing your body to rest at ease, while also at the same time manifesting a certain quality of alertness, right? Or just sensitivity to the experience that we're going to have. So take a couple minutes to allow yourself to get comfortable in that way. And once you've done that, take a couple deep breaths. And having done that, allow yourself to take a moment to inhale what it is that you need right now, and exhale what you don't need. So for example, I'm a little sleepy today, so I'm going to inhale a sense of alertness, presence. And try and exhale sluggishness. Inhale the ability to let my body rest. And exhale the need to do things perfectly. Inhale love. And exhale brokenness. And now in this moment, see if you can settle so that you can bring your awareness to your breath or to an object in front of you. And allow yourself to just focus your awareness on your breathing or on the object, while remaining open and aware and accepting of whatever arises in this moment. As we do this, try to allow yourself to adopt the perspective of Tilopa's 6 nails, giving up any attachment to the past, any preoccupation with the future, giving up a desire to need to know what is going on in this moment. Letting go of any kind of analysis and need to figure anything out. And just resting. We'll sit like this for a while. And if you find yourself distracted, just bring your awareness back to your breathing. No judgment, just gentle refocus. And slowly bring your awareness back to this particular meeting. So that we can be together. And before you bring yourself fully, allow yourself to make any mental note of that experience. So I wanted to see if there were any questions straight off the bat, as it were. So if anything comes to mind, feel free to ask a question. There's the Ask a Question tab on the bottom of the page, or you can write into the text box anything you like as well. And if there aren't any questions right now, that's fine. We can get to it. So, as I said before, last week I was sharing a portion of a song called "The Ultimate Supreme Path of Mahamudra," written by Lama Zhang from the book called "The Mind of Mahamudra," which is in the Tibetan Classic series. It was translated by Peter Allen Roberts. Oh, here's a question. Okay, so Sarah, this is a great question. I wasn't laughing at your question. I was, forgive me, I'm a little tired. But so I tend to mumble. So I've been saying Tilopa 6 nails, but maybe it's come across as Tilopa 6 nows. But why I was laughing was because actually I think that's kind of a cool name. And really, what he's doing is asking us to be in the now, right? Not in the past, not the future, not wrapped up with what's going on right now. So nails, it's called Tilopa 6 nails in the sense that each one of these points kind of affixes you to the meditation ethos or imperative, or there's a term anchoring the mind. So the instruction known as Tilopa 6 nails kind of anchors our mind within the experience of Mahamudra. So they're nails in the sense that we're kind of nailing into place the mind. We're kind of like Martin Luther, who affixed his theses to the church door by nailing it, right? So it's meant as a way of kind of, I guess, stabilizing Mahamudra practice. Yeah, that's why it's called that. Hopefully that's clear. So in this song by Lama Zhang, last week I read the portion on the view, half of the portion on the view, and I'm going to continue with that and then talk some more about it, give some instruction. There'll be time to ask questions the moment I finish with reading this. So, and just like we did last time, with instructions like this, my experience of them is that they tend to be deep and potentially very rich. So if you can, try and remain in a meditation kind of posture, trying to allow your body to relax, your mind to relax. You can close your eyes and just listen to me read this. And as I read this and you listen, trying to allow your mind to settle into just spacious, radical acceptance of the moment. Right? And we'll see where this text takes us. So here we are. Okay. However profound the words are, and however many synonyms are employed, it is impossible for them to pinpoint the true nature of the mind. However wise you are, however profound your analysis, though you describe it for many incalculable aeons, it would be impossible to realize the true nature of the mind, for its natural condition is not an object for analysis. However well you try to sieve for planets and stars that appear in a lake, it is impossible to catch a single planet or star, because those planets and stars are not existent things. However long you use words to describe it, no matter what refined terms you use, they are not the true nature. For however long you analyze with your mind, no matter how profound your understanding, that is not the true nature. As long as there is duality of seer and seen, it is impossible to realize the true nature. In brief, to think that things are is the root of attachment to everything. From the root of attachment, all of samsara develops. If you identify by thinking it's emptiness, or thinking it's signless and aspirationless, thinking it's unidentifiable, thinking it's completely pure, thinking it's birthless, thinking it's unperceivable, thinking it has no true nature, thinking it is not without elaboration, thinking it is not an object for analysis by speech or mind, thinking it is uncreated and naturally present, and so on. However profound these thoughts, our recognition of emptiness will not transcend the conceptualization of an arrogant mind. Attachment to concepts leads us to fall into inferior states and leads to a continuous ripening of karma from inferior actions. If the chronic condition of samsara is not cured, the illness will continue to occur. Meditators who have views created by their intellect remain chronically ill from the attachment to sectarianism. You must have the innate knowledge that is free of thought. Saying, this is definitive meaning, the true nature, is merely conceptual superimposition, provisional meaning. There is nothing there that Shakyamuni could possibly see. What I'm saying now also cannot describe it. Know that this is like a finger pointing at the moon. If you understand this, words and terminology will not obscure. You will be unstained by the faults of words. Therefore, without abandoning words or analysis, have no arrogant attachment to their meaning. The true nature of your own mind pervades all beings, including their afflictions, their thoughts, their aggregates, their sensory elements and bases, and all worlds, including earth, stones, plants, and trees. In brief, it pervades everything without exception, including all inner and outer things. That pervasion is without the duality of pervader and pervaded. It is the manifestation of one single great identity. All the planets and the stars that appear on a lake are pervaded by the lake, from which they cannot be separated. All the waves that move upon the water are pervaded by water and are inseparable from it. The movement of mirages in the air are pervaded by the air and are inseparable from it. Statues, jewelry, and so on, which are made of gold, are pervaded by gold and are inseparable from it. representations of the 6 kinds of beings made from molasses are pervaded by molasses and are now inseparable from it. Space is not separate from a rainbow. A rainbow is nothing other than space. The rainbow is space, and space is the rainbow. They are not separate. They are inseparable and indivisible. In the same way, the mind and the variety of appearances are inseparable. The mind and emptiness are inseparable. Emptiness and bliss are a great inseparability, a sameness. In the same way, existence and nirvana are inseparable. Their pervading mind is the Mahamudra. Its nature is empty, so there is nothing to be identified. Its characteristic is clarity. The mind's thinking can manifest anything. Its essence is their inseparability, the union of the Vajra mind. The precious mind is the source of countless qualities. It is inexhaustible, imperishable, indestructible, and no one can steal it. This mind that is the treasury of space, the mind that is as pure as crystal, untarnished by stains. The mind is like a lamp's flame. It is self-knowing and self-illuminating. The mind has the essence of enlightenment. It is the nature of luminosity. It is like a river. It is a constant continuum. The mind is like space. There is nothing that can be identified. It is a mind of immaterial wisdom, completely transparent, like a clean vessel filled with water. The mind from which arises all appearances that result from propensities is like the surface of a polished, unblemished mirror. So this is the second half of Lama Shang's description of the view. And as you see here, there's a focus on this kind of aspect of the mind in which its essence is vast, it holds all things. Sometimes in our meditation, we end up becoming kind of, either distracted or, in some cases, attached to the thoughts that arise as we have them. And sometimes these thoughts are things that we kind of tend to solidify. And as we solidify them, we kind of think that we're not engaging in mind. But the fact is that the thoughts are the same nature as the mind that we experience at any given time. So in a sense, this means that we need to kind of try and let go of any anxiety we might feel, or any attachment, or any fear, or any sense that maybe our practice isn't going deep, because there's no separation between thoughts and the mind itself. When we take a look, closely through the practice of meditation, our mind, especially when we begin to look at the location of mind, we begin to explore its vastness and its other qualities. So right now, I want to see if we can take a couple minutes for everyone to kind of just see how that felt, and then we'll answer some questions. In the meantime, though, I just need to, there's one urgent thing I need to take care of, which will take 2 minutes. So if you could just hang tight, I'm going to, let's see if I can, what can I do? Can I mute myself here? No. I will be the big version of the book. Um, Thank you, Dale, for loving my chair. So yeah, so I'm not sure. Payne, are you talking about the larger version of this book? Oh yes, here we are. Yes, yeah, that's the one. So this is like a condensed, smaller version. But yeah, and thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to maybe get a sense of whether or not that made sense. And you could say no. You could be like, man, this is crazy, boring. It's a Friday, and no judgment about that either. Yeah, yeah. The finger in the moon thing is from Zen. Yeah, it's a shared kind of metaphor that comes from the Indian Buddhist tradition, and I imagine it was used in the sutras. And so, because it came about so early, then that ended up kind of traveling around the Buddhist world. I can highlight some of the things that I find the most beautiful. So Payne says, minds that put into practice the secret advice of the sages will act without regard for life and limb. There'll be a simple matter to die in famine. Yes. Is that, I don't know if that's in this section right here on the view, unless it's from the first half. So there are a couple of very important points here, though. But yeah, it is applicable. So let me answer Sam's question. I'm going to point out some important points of this. So Sam writes, I find myself thinking about language. Recently, I've noticed as I meditate that sometimes there seems to be less language around what is happening in my mind. Things are still there, but with less chatter and naming. Is this the same idea of the same as the idea of conceptualizing? Yes. So yeah, in these kind of meditation practices, as we're sitting, and again, when they talk about the mind being luminous and the ground of all things, right? Everything comes up. So, I was joking with everybody in an earlier session about there's a bus stop right in front of our apartment building. And sometimes the bus drivers honk the horn, right? So you could be sitting in meditation, the bus driver will honk the horn, and like that sometimes will automatically generate thoughts, right? You're like, oh, why does he keep doing that? That's noise pollution, blah, blah, blah. You know, if you're having a hard time concentrating and then that happens, it will, you know, just lead to this unending, you know, thought pattern. So when that happens, trying to allow ourselves to rest into the experience of what's happening in the moment just by being aware of it, right? Just noticing all the thought activity without labeling or without needing to, you know, and this goes back to Tilipa's point, needing to analyze, like, oh, it's that bus again, blah, blah, blah. You know, I should call Department of Transportation and complain, you know, or MTA. And, you know, so just cutting that, right? So sometimes, and there was language in the first half of this about, you know, if you cut the tree, the leaves will die, right? And so in this kind of symbology, the leaves represent individual thoughts, right? And the tree is the tree of conceptualization. If we cut the tree of conceptualization by just resting and accepting whatever is arising, right? And as you say, with the point of language, like it's this thing about labeling, right? If we're just able to not get involved in what looks gray and what looks green and what looks blue and what looks yellow and what looks red within our field of reference, and we're just able to just let those things happen without our labeling, we end up freeing ourselves in the moment from conceptualization. And when we cut the root of conceptualization, we end up cutting in that moment an aspect of samsara. You know, so why do we suffer? We suffer for, you know, primarily because of ignorance, the experience of ignorance. And one of the roots of ignorance, or one of the ways that ignorance is expressed, is through attachment, and attachment arises through conceptualizing. So when we're conceptualizing everything around us, we're kind of wrapped up in this attachment of knowing everything, right? So, but to know without attachment is to really rest in awareness, right? To experience everything that's arising in the moment. So if there's something that we don't like, I can't really think of an object I don't like, but you know, let's say a food that I have a problem. I kind of like a lot of foods, but but let's say there's something that you just find, you know, oh, disgusting, you know, or aberrant, and imagine that thing is right in front of you, and use that as a supportive meditation in terms of, you know, anchoring the mind on this thing. There you get to experiment with thoughts that end up arising because of, you know, even the existence of this thing. Right? And when we're able to rest freely, we learn how we can begin to cut through these attachments, most of which are rooted in, you know, the process of conceptualizing good or bad, you know, big or small. And it's so automatic when we begin to kind of look around. I mean, you know, we're so spatial and we exist in space. So, you know, we kind of almost automatically will analyze distance, right, when we see things. So it becomes, you know, exciting to begin to experiment with going about our daily lives, trying to be free from all of these ways that, you know, we've kind of really become habituated to engaging with everything that arises, by breaking those cycles. So Tim writes, is this the idea that all objects that we perceive, sights, sounds, or our senses of embodiment, are impossible to separate from the mind? Yes. So, you know, when you're in meditation, Tim, If your eyes are open, right, and your ears are open, right, you're listening, and you're aware of the temperature in the room, wherever you are. So their whole field of senses is open in that moment. Just letting things happen without, just through knowing, through the awareness. Right now, so what is this experience when we do this? Is this mind? Is this not mind? Mind ends up being the ground for this experience. Right? But it encompasses all things. So it encompasses, the visual consciousness. It encompasses the olfactory consciousness, auditory consciousness, all the ways we sense. And then even our experience of space, our experience of, the vastness of space is also something. So that's exactly the case. So Sarah writes, someone brought up translation. Do you find certain language or phrases, not necessarily Tibetan, can help us get closer to cutting the tree, or is this idea just further intellectualizing? No, it's not further intellectualizing because like this is where it becomes interesting, like talking about like Dharma practice and colonization. In a way, like our need to conceptualize things is almost like an implicit need or an inherent need to colonize the whole of appearance, right? So to colonize what Brooklyn looks like out these windows. I know, I've got the spatial relationships down. I know what's going on. That person looks like a jerk. Like, whatever it is, that person looks like they're nice. Like, all of the conceptual kind of projections we place onto things is almost like it could be likened to a form of colonization, right? Like when we talk about how, like in the Christian tradition, they talk about like God created the world in His image, right? Now, when we look at this from a Buddhist perspective, like to some extent, we through conceptualization, we are constantly creating the world in our image, not in terms of the way we look, but in terms of the way we want everything to look, right? And in terms of what we want, how we want everything to mean for us. And this isn't a Buddhist way of thinking about, it's a Buddhist way of thinking about what we do in an innate way. Now, I bring this up because language, just as language has a tremendous amount of impact on colonization in kind of the real kind of strict Orthodox term of the word, the way we language Dharma has a tremendous amount of impact on how we begin to understand how we can practice, right? So this is where the translation piece and phraseology that we might find in the way Tibetan is translated can impact our experience. So there are lots of different ways of kind of unpacking the Dharma. So like in this particular case, this is like a high-end translation. So it's kind of like kind of academic, but still oriented towards Dharma practitioners. But like, it's like high-end. Now this could be translated into more vernacular English, right? And so the words that would be picked would be different, and the valence might also be different as well in terms of like the tonality of the language. In which case it could be more powerful or less powerful, depending on kind of where we're coming at language from. So certain, and again, I mean, it's almost as if there's like a karma. We have karma in relationship, or karma with languages, right? Karma with habits around the way that we express things. So some language will just totally like arrest the mind, right? It just cuts through all the bullshit, and we're able to experience this non-conceptual state. Others, we might be more attracted to them, and we find ourselves kind of like intellectually stimulated by the language, which might be pleasurable in the sense of connecting to the instruction intellectually, but not lead to that lack of conceptualization. So language is important. The most important thing, though, in these practices is to separate out when we're being kind of intellectual, because there's nothing wrong with being intellectual about Dharma. And I've mentioned it before. Like, I've got tons of books. It's pretty much all I read is Dharma stuff. But I also know to separate that from practice. And so when I'm practicing, I try and everything I'm doing, I try and kind of get back into that practice experience of not conceptualizing. So hopefully that's helpful. I know it was a little bit long-winded. So before I answer any other questions, but please keep them coming if you like. There's this one stanza. So where it's written, the mind is like a lamp's flame. It is self-knowing and self-illuminating. The mind has the essence of enlightenment. It has a nature of luminosity. The mind is like a river. It is a constant continuum. Mind is like space. There's nothing that can be identified. And so the beauty of this passage, and it's not too long. We can do it in parts, Anjani. So please, I don't want to let any questions go unanswered. But I'm going to go from the bottom up with these 4 lines. So the mind is like space. There's nothing that can be identified. So at the end of the day, the mind is so vast and spacious, right? And that's its quality, that to single out specific sub-qualities of it is to misinterpret its true nature, right? It's vast, it's expansive, it holds all things. And so therefore, to kind of, delineate each little quality of the mind is actually kind of more of a neurotic, conceptual way of approaching this, which doesn't do the practice any good. The mind is like a river. It is a constant continuum. So just as when we talk about, stilling the mind. So the mind is a river. It's a constant continuum. Thought activity happens all the time, right? So thoughts come and go, and blah 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 all day long. They come and go even while we're sleeping. The big point in this is that's its true nature. It's a continuum like that. So we shouldn't become obsessed with trying to cut that practice, like of it moving, right? But what we want to do is to be able to rest in awareness so that we can appreciate that continuum for what it is. And then as we begin to engage with open, wakeful awareness in relationship to that continuum, then we begin to understand and begin to experience how spacious and vast it is. The mind has the essence of enlightenment. It has the nature of luminosity. So the luminous aspect of mind is that it can't be stained, right? just as we can think about we can think about murder forever. Murder, 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 murder. You know, murder this, murder that, murder this person, murder this other person, like murder violently, like murder with poison, murder and chop up the body, you know, murder and burn the body, murder and eat the body, like whatever, like crazy, you know, dirty thoughts we might have, that does not stain the mind, right? That those are just, you know, thoughts that come and go. You know, there's the beautiful part about this is this kind of emphasizes the, you know, fundamental Buddha nature, the fundamental primordial purity that is inherent and underlies, you know, the entire aspect of mind. And why this is important is because, you know, we, coming from Abrahamic faith tradition backgrounds, or culture rooted generally in Abrahamic faith traditions in the US, the UK, is that we struggle with guilt quite a bit. And so it's easy to kind of bring guilt and shame into our Mahamudra practice. But this one line, you know, the mind has the essence of enlightenment. It has a nature of luminosity, kind of, you know, massages us back into this place of kind of just letting go of that, like letting go of the bullshit of, you know, shame for what I'm thinking, or, you know, shame or dirtiness for like the habitual mental experiences I'm having in this particular moment. And it doesn't matter what's happening, the fundamental basis for mind is, or of mind, is awakened. The mind is like a lamp's flame. It is self-knowing and self-illuminating. And this is also very similar to the fundamental aspect of mind is awareness, right? And when we start meditation practice, we might not be aware of that, or it might not make sense, or it might be, we might get kind of tricked into this kind of illusion that awareness is something I need to add to my practice, right? But that's not true. Awareness is naturally present. You know, we just, the part of, you know, meditation practice is practicing, like working, to come back to recognizing the awareness. And once we're able to recognize what awareness is, and we're able to begin to, you know, play with and explore awareness in our meditation, then we begin to, that kind of fans outward, and we begin to understand and recognize the inherent enlightenment of mind, the vastness of mind, and all the qualities that can't be stained. So Anjana writes, I've been sitting a lot with the slipperiness and sometimes treacherousness of words. I find myself going back to the luminous Audre Lorde's words, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. It's in a very particular context of anti-Black racism, patriarchy, and queerphobia, of course, and it is not my intention to extrapolate it in a careless way. But I feel sometimes we can be ensnared by words in this circular trap. When you're reading The View today, that section about thinking all these profound thoughts and words, but it is still thinking and words, and so it still keeps you entrapped in births and more karma. It feels like you have told us words, it feels like you have to hold words very lightly, as placeholders maybe. But placeholders that you are constantly relinquishing, like maybe climbing a ladder but committing to kick out the previous rungs with every step you take. I'm sorry for the length of this. Please don't apologize. This is perfect. And thank you for letting me articulate it, MJ, and everyone else for your patience. No, this is exactly the point. So, you know, the publisher of Modern Tantric Buddhism is the same publisher for, you know, Broad's book and then Radical Dharma. And about this time last year, I went out to the Bay Area to go meet with the publisher because we were kind of finalizing Modern Tantric Buddhism, and Tim, the publisher, was telling me about all the flack he took for letting Reverend Angel use the language she wanted to use, and that the language was, not standard published English usage, and that was precisely her point. And she used the same quote when he was kind of pushing back with her about, like, come on, like, we need to kind of edit this back into a format that everybody will be familiar with. And she brought up, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And he recognized that and was like, okay, you're right. We got to keep this, the way you intend. And so what is the most important? So, these texts like these, and any kind of text that points out the nature of mind is really great, right? And important. But at the same time, for multiple purposes, multiple reasons, it's really up to us to then digest, translate, and make sense for us individually what the text is saying, right? Because this is not about, like, enlightenment can't be a process of colonization. That's not how it works. So, it's not like, this text, through this text, I need to subjugate my understanding of mind, right? And then I'll become enlightened. Like, I was gonna say, if only it were that easy, which is a really messed up thing to say, because what it essentially does is negate my inherent self-worth, right? So that's not what we're doing. So this point, Anjana, that you brought up is vital, because what we need, you're pointing out that we need to liberate language and liberate the way we language, because the way we language is wrapped up in, the same kind of conceptual discursiveness that keeps us locked up in the prison of samsara. So Lama Shang is pointing this out, but not as explicitly, right? But so as we language our experience, even to ourselves, so like, when I say, now take a moment to just kind of, reflect and make a mental note of, what came up in your meditation. It's not to kind of chisel everything into stone like the 10 Commandments are commonly, thought to have been done. It's to kind of make a very light imprint, or a very kind of take a very temporary picture of what happened in that session, right? Or what awareness or what insight is arising in this moment. Very lightly examine, reflect, hold, and then let go. So my root teacher, Tsunma Dechen Zangmo, told me, and I've mentioned this now, like, it feels like 1,000 times. Like, if you must read books, read them and try and forget them. Read books about Dharma, and especially the nature of mind, because we fall prey to this dynamic of kind of cheating our experience by developing intellectual knowledge. When we fall prey to intellectual knowledge, that can become very seductive when we don't feel like meditating. Oh, well, why should I meditate? I already know what the deal is. Like, I know what the answer to the question is because I read about it. But rather, we should really jump into our practice and bite into it, with our teeth, and language it for ourselves, but then not hold on to it so that we're creating a dogma. All we're doing is noticing, so like, I really like to use metaphors that involve botanic gardens, because when we go to like, or at least I can speak from my own experience, when I go to a botanic garden, I'm never like, well, that rose is red and that rose is orange and that rose is a rose color, right? That one is white, that one's big, that one's small. Like, we see all of that stuff in our field of reference, right? But with some things, we do not classify in such an ironclad way. Right? We do not conceptualize all things that way. So if we can be light, you know, and again, I'm gonna like, you know, I think also probably I was just thinking that the intersection of whiteness and the difficulty of understanding Mahamudra is that whiteness implicitly requires us to know every fucking thing about what's happening in the moment and to categorize the shit out of it, right? And to then, of course, profit from that knowledge. Again, when we practice Mahamudra, we don't want to be doing that at all. We want to just be resting in the experience freely, openly, no judgment, not plotting, not conceptually trying to, you know, whittle away the common denominator of my experience at this moment, just resting freely, openly. We're not expending energy right now when we meditate. There's nothing to profit from in this moment. When we're in direct relationship with things, right, there's no implicit need to develop a categoric kind of conceptual catalog, I'm going to alliterate, of everything that's happening in the moment. You know? So in sometimes, like I've heard some of my teachers say to me, when you're picking a teacher, or when you're looking for teachers, find teachers that are childlike, and not that they're infantile, but generally when we practice, you know, Mahamudra for a long time, a lot of the, like, you know, seriousness of the conceptual distinctions between things kind of melts away, right? And that means that you end up being a little childlike, right? And we can think back to times in our lives where there was that increased innocence of not having to worry so much about X, Y, or Z that's happening, you know, all around us, right? The seriousness, the gravity of this moment. What about just being? You know, and so the practice of Mahamudra is not an intellectual practice as much as it is a coming back into direct being with whatever it is that's happening. And because the mind is a continuum, everything that's arising is constantly changing, right? The way we think, what we're thinking about. I'm tired, I'm excited, I'm feeling dull, I'm happy. You know, all those things, it will change over the course of an hour. And so to just let those things come and go without attachment, without, you know, needing to categorize, is really, you know, the essence of the practice. So Sam, I think it's pain. Right? It's, words feel like dancing partners at a masquerade party to me. Yeah. And then Sam writes, it's like it's not just about not bringing language to experience, but also not starting with language and forcing experience to fit in. Yes, absolutely. And Anjana writes, yes, the violence of categories and the beauty of simplicity. This is also helpful. Thank you. And what a beautiful image, Pain. Thank you. Sam, thank you, by the way, Anjana, for articulating that. I found it really helpful. It really is a wonderful point, Anjana. See, we just rewrote the song. That's awesome. So, you know, this is I'm really excited about this session, because we really touched on something that a lot of people find. I mean, maybe it's challenging to do, but the the most important part of the practice is this practice of, understanding what it means to rest in non-conceptuality. And then for us humans, because of maybe the way we're structured, and then within that, being human, there's so many different, reasons why we tend to be conceptual and fall into habits of that. We need to learn how to break that. And it's not really, it has nothing to do with, becoming anti-intellectual or becoming dumb, or not being intellectually curious. It's just about understanding how language leads to suffering. And at the same time, how language, when properly used, leads to liberation. So language is inherently a potential skillful means, right? It's a way through which we can help create peace and love, right, for people on just a normal day basis. When we talk about Dharma, language is a way of helping to convey how we can cultivate experiences that break our cycles of suffering. And then, of course, language in a revolutionary political way helps to break us free from bondage and suffering. So language is a very important piece of the way we conceptualize meditation and what's happening. So for white people in this group, Mahamudra can be a very powerful way for examining how conceptuality arises in relationship to when other people become the appearance that arises in meditation. Right? So if we're sitting with our awareness, just kind of out there, eyes open, and a variety of people walk by, right? Or we're witness to a variety of situations, right? And we're really able to allow, ourselves to rest without being so obsessed with conceptualizing what's going on. We're able to be in a space that's free from a tremendous amount of projection and conceptualization, which unfortunately, due to the way that we're tend to be habituated to racializing people and all of the subsequent reactions to how people are racialized, we have the opportunity to break free from that. We gain some real wisdom around how we fall prey to projection, conceptual habits and things of that nature. And so, like, I had a teacher, Pating Rinpoche, who's a very elderly Lama in Sikkim, who told me that at one point in his life, he only ate sour foods for 1 year, and then sweet foods for another year, and astringent foods for a year after that. And I asked him, like, why'd you do that, Rinpoche? And he said, because I had to break free of attachment to other things. And if there was a food quality that I didn't like, and I was just going to eat that whole thing for a year, right, then I would have to break free from the conceptual kind of discursive prison that kept me in a non-harmonious relationship to those tastes, right, and those sensations, and those sense experiences. So, there's this radical quality. I mean, of course, it's radical quality in radical acceptance. Like, what does it mean to radically accept whatever is arising in our field of reference without judgment? Without without worrying about the reaction, and also without worrying about being equanimous. So like imagine like visualizing Donald Trump and just using him as the the field of reference, visual field of reference for meditation. And at first there will be visceral reactions that are negative, right? And if you sit with his image and rest in that and rest in that and rest in that and rest in that, there can even be radical acceptance of his image, right? But what it asks of us is to cut the discursive mind. Now, that's not to justify anything that he does or stands for or thinks or wants to enact at all. Because what we're looking at is not changing another person. We're looking at changing the way we are relating to the world around us, right? And also how our own points of orientation can be places that we get attached to as well. And that's where, like, at different stages in the practice, our own location becomes something that we're less concerned about because we're able to accept all locations as they arise. So again, that doesn't mean we become fascists or hurt people, but as we become more awakened, we become more capable of finding a home in every kind of environment. We allow ourselves, or what arises is a willingness and an ability to accept whatever arises. Whereas in the beginning, when we kind of set off on this journey, there are still these kind of things that will never be, or we say to ourselves, I will never be able to accept this thing. And it's not that you have to say it's okay to accept it, but again, it's looking at, the reactivity of what's arising and just trying to let that go. So I don't know if I've said too much. Thoughts, feelings? Did we all fall asleep? Oh, yes. So Anjana writes, could you say a bit about how accepting can become a way of bypassing? Yeah, so, so I think so, for example, like that acceptance of Donald Trump, right? For most of us, myself included, within our practice, to begin to experience a deepening of the radical acceptance of whatever is arising in the moment necessitates, if it's authentic, necessitates the acknowledgement, not of the fact that we're wrong, right? Like, oh, I thought he was a jerk, but now I just realized like he's emptiness. Like that's not like, yes, Donald Trump's essence is emptiness, the same way ours is. Resting that in that experience is possible because we're able to do that with all beings, right? And it doesn't mean that we're bypassing, because you can still say that that guy's an asshole, because he is. It becomes a problem, like radical acceptance or acceptance like that becomes a form of spiritual bypassing when we don't want to look at the complexity, right? And this is the thing, like within Tantric Buddhism, but you also find this in any tradition that has kind of a non-dual approach, where at a certain point, either one practice or several practices, like the aim is to be able to rest in or experience something that is non-binary, right? So a state which is not really concerned with the greater good or evil, right? It's the experience of wisdom is beyond both of those things. Some people will do that as a way to hide, or as a way to step away from accepting responsibility for one's place in relationship to, say, racism, for example, or larger systemic oppressions, right? So we can easily bypass by saying, well, it's all empty, right? Because like that's what it says in this book. And while on an intellectual, like academic level, well, technically, yes, everything's empty, but it's clear that the work hasn't been done. So doing the work of practicing and coming to that realization is really coming to the realization of accepting the tremendous pain and suffering that somebody like Donald Trump is in, right? It's also rooted in understanding how I too could arise in that form if I'm not careful, right? It's to like the practice ends up having to become about engaging very deeply with what was hard about letting go of Donald Trump, right? And so letting go of Donald Trump means we need to keep in our heart and our minds those qualities that we don't like, we don't accept, we think are ignorant, right? But the spiritual bypass is kind of like a way of, like, the quick clean. It's like, oh, just get it out of here, right? Like, it's all empty. I don't have to worry about it. That's not accepting anything. That's really kind of putting a blindfold on. So hopefully that didn't sound like bullshit. And Matt asks, activism and even just speaking out seems to require conceptualizing. As a white, straight, cisgender man, I recognize the description you gave earlier of always assuming I have the answers. Any thoughts on this? Yeah, so this is a good question. And this kind of came up during the practice session on, I think it was Tuesday. Yes, yeah, activism does require a relationship to concepts. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with concepts, right? And so this kind of gets back to that line about the mind as yes. So the mind is like a river; it is a constant continuum. So, like the mind thinks, the thoughts arise in the mind, and that's okay, right? We're not, and again, this is where we can't be extreme about this. Like, the mind is the basis for everything that arises that humans create, right? So, like, New York, I'm in Brooklyn, right? So, like, the magnitude of New York City in terms of urban planning arose from the minds of people, right? The beneficial qualities of some of the urban planning structure in New York City arose from the mind. And then the crappy, like, ignorant, institutionalized racism and other forms of oppression aspect of the urban planning of New York City also arose, from the ground of the mind, right? The minds of humans, minds of people, right? So the mind itself, we've begun to explore, is primordially pure. It's natural wakefulness. Concepts and thoughts arise from that. John Coltrane arose from that. Alice Coltrane arose from that. All of the great artists, the poets, the painters, musicians, the philosophers, the political thinkers, all the people, the religious thinkers, spiritual thinkers, all of these, the wonderful creations that they contributed to humanity arose from mind, right? Activism arises from mind, right? Ideas of justice, ideas of freedom, ideas of liberation, right? So just because it arises doesn't mean it's negative. The problem is that when we develop these kinds of real hard, strict relationships with meditation, of course, but then and in that vein to concepts in general. So there's nothing inherently. So I'm going to back it up. Like, activism can be as samsaric and suffering producing as it can be nirvanic and liberation producing. But it's up to us. The same way music can promote suffering, the arts can promote suffering. If we become too attached to everything, everything produces suffering, right? But if we can maintain a much more open, spacious relationship to anything, that which caused suffering previously becomes part of the experience of nirvana or awakening, right? So just because, you could say freedom is a concept, yes, it is, or that liberation is a concept, or that the equality, right? Genuine equality is a concept. But it is when we become attached, that's when we're like, oh, and sometimes we need to, right? Sometimes that's what's needed, is to really drive home something with force. Again, in our practice session on Tuesday, I talked a bit about kind of the implicit staining that many of us suffer from, at the hands of Abrahamic thinking that we're born into, right? Which is very binary. It's this or that. You're good or bad, God or Satan, But the thing is that the Buddhist tradition, like the Hindu tradition, like a lot of other traditions, don't exist in that binary system, binary way of thinking, at all, right? So there's room for destruction. There's room for complete annihilation. There's room for generation. There's room for illness. There's room for disease-causing beings. And so it behooves us to begin to allow ourselves to try and even bring those kind of very automatic Abrahamic ways of relating to concepts into our meditation practice, to begin to undo them, right? So I want to get to a couple of these points. So thank you, Nicole. So pain, conceptually, it sounds like you're describing taking emptiness as an object. That's what we don't want to do. Liz, I needed this teaching today. Great comments and questions. Christina, I find activism starts to cause suffering when I get very dogmatic about how activism should be done, or what the one right response is, or fixated on very specific political ideologies. Exactly. So this is just like bringing it back to meditation. If our leg falls asleep in meditation, like how extremely are we going to react? Or if again, okay, so like today, I had to engage in an activity in an environment that was just terribly painful, right? And I was able to not lose my ground in this very painful environment because I tried to approach it from the perspective of Mahamudra meditation, right? Where, yes, right now I feel the pain, of and to bless a lot of dead bodies today from coronavirus, and it was just sad and hard, and I could feel it in my like right in my solar plexus. It was just like going crazy. It was just a painful, sad situation, and so I could acknowledge everything that was happening. Right, be aware of the kind of physiological response I was having, the energetic response I was having, and that was just happening, right? But at the same time, totally present with the moment, present with the pain, present with the anxiety, present with the sadness, present with the fear, present with the mourning and the grieving that people I don't know are going through, and to just remain in that space, perform the action that I had to perform, and then also let that go when that time was over. Right. So it's really grasping, and grasping, I think, is definitely kind of an American samsara. We grasp onto everything, and we grasp onto the things we love and we value, which is fine until it's not. And part of our work in moving towards liberation has to be understanding when we get too tight. So Payne says, yes, finding authentic space within activism is hard. Eddie says, which is what brought me to Buddhism. And Christina, same with me, Eddie. I came to Buddhism after extreme burnout from anti-capitalist organizing. Yeah. So, it's amazing how Lama Shang, can produce, so many great questions, but also so many great insights. And how, again, the name of this teaching series, which I guess we're going to just have forever, every Friday, is Mahamudra for the people, right? And so this is for us to use in activism, in writing, in poetry writing, in music, in being in relationship to others, in our meditation practice, on the cushion and off the cushion. But really learning how to embrace the ethos, right, the approach that we find in Mahamudra, the essence of Mahamudra, and blend that outwards will lead to an ability to experience greater wisdom and greater awakening in most of what we do. So we're at time. Oh yeah, sure. And yeah, in the next, so I'm going to continue. I did, the view, and then, for the next 2 sessions, we'll do the path, and then the 2 sessions after that, we'll do the fruit, or the result, depending on where you're coming from in your language. But so for now, this is where we're going to end. I just really want to thank everybody. This has been a tremendously hard week for a lot of us. I want to thank you for showing up. I want to thank you for your practice. And in this moment, let us all dedicate the merit I'm going to give a little space so that everybody can dedicate the merit as you need. And so as you focus on any merit gained from this teaching and from your practice, to all of those in need, I'm going to dedicate this to you, as well as all the beings whose minds and hearts and bodies are on fire. May waves of blissful peace, justice, wisdom, compassion, and liberation spread everywhere in this world system. Thank you all for showing up, and have a good weekend. And actually see you at the Kumbh Mela. I don't know if that makes sense on the calendar, but we're doing this crazy thing, which is going to be 24 hours of fun, starting on Saturday. So love to you all. Take good care.